Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Gallant Says podcast, live, youtube.com/Paul Gallant or twitch.tv/Gallant Says in video form, also available wherever you get your podcasts. That is Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. It is Sunday, October 8th, 2023. The time, 4:15 p.m., and here we are once again talking about a disappointing Houston Texans loss to the Atlanta Falcons, 21-19. And I know what I'm going to hear from a lot of y'all. You're going to tell me about how this is another example of the Houston Texans being the Houston Texans, and I get it. It felt like a same old Houston Texans kind of loss. You've got decisive victories against teams you're not supposed to beat. The Jaguars, convincing fashion in Jacksonville, 37-17. You beat the hell out of the Steelers, 30-6, and on a day where the Jaguars beat the Buffalo Bills. Going into this game, you're like, okay, well, maybe Jacksonville's good. Maybe that win's better than we were thinking it was over the last couple of weeks. The Steelers beat the Ravens. Oh, Steelers still have a pulse. So you're going on the road to Atlanta, and here was the reality. And I said this on Friday and also before the game today. The only thing that the Houston Texans could probably do in a city that is more focused on the Houston Astros in the playoffs is disappoint. That's all they could have done today, because you're playing against an Atlanta Falcons team that's got no Q rating. Even if they might be decent, they're 3-2 now. And you lost the turnover battle in this game on the road and still lost. And to make it worse, this was a largely boring game. It was 11 punts. It was 6 field goals. So I think it's a perfect storm for the people that don't want the Texans to win them back to say, yeah, same old Texans. I don't have to pay attention. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Grapha O says, I love the show, but don't get me to stop watching. Don't disappoint me. It's year one. You got to be kidding. What? What the fuck are you talking about? It's a disappointing loss. But it's a loss that's not a same old Texans loss. It's a loss that exposes the limitations of this team. One that is still rebuilding 3 years and 3 head coaches after moving on from Bill O'Brien. A lot of frustrating things in this game. Let's just start off with number one. They want to run the football really badly. And today, the Texans trying to run the football was, again, an ugly operation. They just can't do it, especially going to the right. And you finally have a configuration of offensive linemen that, for the most part, you trust. Laramie Tunsil's back at left tackle. Titus Howard at left guard. You would rather him be at right tackle, but the situation calls for him at left guard. You put him in there, especially with all the injuries that they've had. You got Jarrett Patterson at center. You got Shaq Mason at right guard. You got George Fant at right tackle. This is a better offensive line than the week that they were rolling out before. Last week when they were rolling out no Laramie Tunsil and no Titus Howard. This was a better unit. But even Dameon Pierce, who is a good player, can't work his magic behind that. And this running game today felt a lot more like an old school offense trying to establish the run than it felt like a off-brand of Kyle Shanahan, off-brand of Mike McDaniel trying to run the ball. Didn't feel as creative. Felt like they were turning around and handing it off and assuming that through attrition, they would eventually start moving the football. That used to be a big Bill O'Brien thing. Bill O'Brien loved to just run the football, and he looked at a running attack as a battering ram. You run the football enough, eventually it wears down a defense, and they're not going to be able to hold them up. So that's the running game. It has been a frustration through 5 weeks, and especially for anyone who has Dameon Pierce maybe on their fantasy team. As far as the passing game goes, so CJ Stroud didn't get sacked. That's nice. He didn't throw any interceptions either. There were a couple of close calls, but he set the NFL record for most throws without an interception to open his career. You feel very good about C.J. Stroud minimizing mistakes, not doing that many crazy things out there. But I thought he had a hard time dissecting Atlanta's defense. They threw a bunch of guys back in coverage. I saw a lot of 3-man rushes, a lot of 4-man rushes. And that would be confusing for a rookie quarterback who, as a best wide receiver, has Nico Collins, at least statistically to this point, who during this game lost Tank Dell to a concussion, lost Robert Woods to an injury. My God, this team is just unlucky on the injury front. You could make excuses there. You could also say that reality finally caught up to the Texans wide receiver group. Whatever argument you want to make, Atlanta had a very good game plan defensively to combat CJ Stroud, because I think right now, if you're going up against the Texans, you have to find a way to make CJ Stroud just throw it and throw it and throw it some more. I think this is a nice little blueprint that Atlanta put together, and I'm very curious as to how Bobby Slowick will adjust. Slowick's done a pretty good job of adjusting to this point this year, and he even talked about what he learned in that game against the Baltimore Ravens. But now you got to go back to the drawing board. A couple of games in the NFL, any rookie with enough tape, teams are going to be able to attack him. And yeah, I thought Stroud was a little bit hesitant back there. At the very least, though, no sacks, no interceptions, no fumbles. But still, it felt very, very conservative. And eventually, their inability to move the ball, they only had the football for 24 minutes and 28 seconds. They were 4 for 13 on third down. It caught up to him. Atlanta moved the ball inside the Houston 25 their last 4 drives. They fumbled on the first of those, scored a touchdown the next, had 2 field goals the rest of the way, one of them a game-winning field goal. Robert McCrory says, prevent defense sucks, I think referring to the last drive of the game. Yeah, the clock management down the stretch wasn't my cup of tea. The pace with which the Texans moved on that last drive, the touchdown drive, set themselves up in a spot where they couldn't kick a field goal. And hey, they didn't have to kick a field goal because of how long they took. They got the touchdown, but it also set them up in a spot where they didn't run off enough clock scoring that touchdown to keep an Atlanta football team that's been moving the football all game long. They didn't. I felt like the game management hurt the Texans in that spot. You add a little prevent defense there. I don't know if it was straight prevent defense, but it certainly was a soft zone that they were playing. You got to be careful, though, because, okay, say you're not playing a soft zone. Say you are playing tight, and all of a sudden you give up a big play, and the Falcons are quickly in field goal range. It's a tricky situation. I think it has more to do with the time that was left and the fact that the Texans defense was probably pretty gassed because of how long they were on the field in the second half. They couldn't get after the passer. I don't know if you guys knew that the Texans had the number 2 pass rush win rate in the NFL, at least per ESPN going into the week. But they just had 3 quarterback hits, 0 sacks, and Ritter had the best game of his career. 28 of 37 for 329 yards and a touchdown. And when he was throwing to tight ends, 14 catches for 176 yards between Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, and Mecole Pruitt. So that also not good. A reflection on the Texans linebackers? Was it a reflection of a banged-up Texans secondary that also was without Shaquille Griffin in this game? I don't know on that front. They at the very least stopped, for the most part, the Falcons' running attack. Bijan Robinson had some flashy plays, but he only had 14 carries for 46 yards. Tyler Algier, it was awesome whenever he was on the field. He had 17 carries for 40 yards. So they also held the other team's running game in check. Atlanta had 36 carries for 96 yards on the game for 2.7 yards a carry, and it was Desmond Ritter who ended up scoring the touchdown for them. So there's nothing to really get mad about, per se. It's just, I think the limitations of this defense were exposed. The defensive line especially up the middle. As far as talent is concerned, like maybe you like Malik Collins or Sheldon Rankins, but you need more than just a Will Anderson out there. Will Anderson had some flashy plays, but if you've been paying attention to some of the advanced numbers, his pass rush win rate, instead of like Elmer Fudd there for a second, is pretty good, but he's been getting double teamed a lot. And he had a couple of hits, I think, stuffed runs, but you need more guys up there. You don't really have anyone other than Will Anderson that really looks like they could be a game changer. Jerry Hughes used to be that guy, but not anymore. More comments here. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Rick Hagwood says Atlanta's defensive backs played lights out, way better than I expected. I would agree. They have, at the very least, one really awesome defensive back in Jesse Bates, who they signed away from the from the Cincinnati Bengals. He had an awesome near interception of CJ Stroud in this game, read him perfectly. Stroud was lucky on that one. There was another throw where Stroud had the ball, I think, bounce up in the air, and for some reason, no one was able to come down with it. It looked like the Falcons could have picked it off. Rick continues saying, it's the first time I've seen CJ look frustrated. I would agree. And look, this works against a lot of quarterbacks, dropping a ton of guys back in coverage. I think the good thing is that it'll be a learning experience for CJ Stroud. The bad thing is, though, that ultimately they lose. And I think next week is going to be more difficult for them. The 3-2 New Orleans Saints. The Saints suck on offense right now, but they killed my New England Patriots, who also suck on offense right now. 34-0. They beat New England. Mac Jones got benched again in that one. New Orleans has a good defense. It's going to be a challenge, and it's at home at least. It's at NRG Stadium. That makes you feel a little bit better, but I mean, it ain't going to be easy. And you had an opportunity here against a team I think you're better than in the Falcons to potentially improve yourself to 3-2. Now you're 2-3. It's disappointing. I'm not mad. I know some people are probably going to read the caption of the video with the same old Texans, but I get how a lot of non-diehard Texans fans who are waiting to be pulled back in, I can understand how a lot of Texans fans would say that. Understandably so. You're allowed to be pissed off if you're a Texans fan, just given the way things have gone the last couple of weeks. Bear Brother 123, Paulie's show, Worm Apes. Sean will be back on Monday on the radio show. That's at twitch.tv/Gallant says. Robert McCrory says 2 takeaways should get a win. Field goals will kill you. 100%. I think some would argue that if D'Amico Ryans is truly trying to be aggressive, like we have seen from him early on, right after that first possession of the game where they drove to the Atlanta 19, had a 3rd and 1, got stuffed, I think there was a chance there for D'Amico Ryans to be aggressive and to go for it. And honestly, given how successful that one quarterback sneak that CJ Stroud had where he stepped back and then he went to his left, I think that probably would have worked out had you actually used a quarterback sneak. That play usually works. The push play. Stroud's a big guy. He should be able to get you that yard. So that is a nitpick. And definitely not D'Amico Ryans' best game. I thought that the clock management by the Texans right before the end of the game wasn't great. And there were a couple of dumb penalties in this one. Lots of offsides for the Texans in this game. More comments. B. Hannon. So we off the Texans winning the AFC South. Jags look good today, beating the Bills. That was a weird game. It was in London. I don't want to act like that's the reason the Jaguars won, but it was a rather convincing win for Jacksonville. I truly do not know what to make of Jacksonville. They are an enigma. You know, going into the year, there was a lot of hype about them. Trevor Lawrence is very careless with the football. Buffalo's defense is solid. They had 5 sacks in this game. Low numbers for Lawrence, 25 of 37 for 315 yards and a touchdown. I think the big thing for Jacksonville today, they ran for nearly 200 yards. Buffalo has had a couple of games over the last couple of years where they really, really struggle against the run. What is Ed doing? Comments at youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Yeah, it did feel familiar. Didn't feel very innovative in the running game. Yeah, that's the vibe I got too. And I'm not going to act like I know what the fuck was going on with Bobby Slowick and what they're running. All I know is that whenever the Texans tried to run the football to the right, it went horribly. And that might have been one of the reasons that Bobby Slowick got a little bit conservative with it. But it did feel, like, as a whole, like a very conservative approach by the Texans offense. And honestly, Sean Mapes and I were texting about it during the game. My producer on my radio show, ESPN 97.5, 10 to noon every single weekday. We were texting about how it felt like a Big Ten game. It was a boring fucking game. It really was. I get it. Like, oh, it ended on a walk-off field goal. But as I said before, 11 punts, 6 field goals. I get that we want to keep the foot in football, but that's a little too much foot for my liking. That's more Rex Ryan's taste. Robert McCrory agrees with the people that are saying they should have gone for it right before the halftime on 4th down. Yeah, I guess they had another possession where they could have gone for it. What drive was that? I'm taking a look here. It's pretty frustrating that they got to the 10 and they weren't able to score a touchdown. Was there one right before halftime where they actually were close? No, it was just that one on the first drive of the game. Yeah, I don't know why I'm second guessing myself, but you can make me do that because I've got a little squirrel brain. Manny Martinez also echoing the sentiment of an earlier commenter. Atlanta's secondary is legit. At least we have a quarterback finally, and they were in a position to win. Things are still looking up. I would agree with you there. This is not a game to get off the bandwagon. It's just frustrating because you realize that there's still distance that the Texans have to travel to get to being a relevant football team again. And it also sucks, too, today. I don't know how the Colts keep on winning when Anthony Richardson gets hurt, other than Gardner Minshew's just played well, but Richardson got hurt again, a shoulder injury. So Gardner Minshew steps in, and the Colts beat the Titans 23-16. So the Colts and Jaguars are 3-2, and the Texans and Titans are both 2-3. Bear Brother 123, twitch.tv/Gallant says, is just putting up Union Jack, English flag, and some tea, saying across the pond. Fuck this across the pond stuff. Football is an American game, and I don't care how badly the NFL wants to expand. It's just not going to happen in England like that. And you're taking American football games away from people who live in Jacksonville, from people who live in Buffalo. I think that's bullshit. And I get it, it's a vacation for the people who can actually afford it. But like, why the fuck are we playing games in England? Fuck England. I don't get it. I hate this 8:30 kickoff shit too. Sorry, I don't want to wake up early on a Sunday to watch football. I don't. I love football. I don't love it so much that I'm going to get up that early. I tried soccer. I like soccer. The good soccer, I have to get up early as well. I don't want to do that. I lived on the West Coast long enough. 10 a.m. NFL starts. 9 a.m. college football starts. Too early for me. Gray Lion, 4th and 1 in enemy territory, and you kick a field goal. We settled too much and didn't capitalize on turnovers. Step on their damn necks. Don't let them come back like they just did. It's hard to step on their neck, though, when your offense is limited. You couldn't run the football, and they'd never had a counterpunch for the Falcons just rushing 3 or 4 and throwing a ton of guys back in coverage. Manny Martinez, can we stop the pitch plays? Didn't fool them with the Tank Dell run plays. I imagine those are going to go back in the bag or the trunk or the closet or the attic for the next couple of weeks. More comments. Rick Hagewood. Tunsil still seems to look like his knees are still bothering him. Maybe run blocking was too much for him. I would like all those people who are getting after Tunsil who are saying, oh, he's soft for not being out there, to sit the fuck down. Because comments like that, I think, are correct. Knee injuries suck, especially when you're playing that position and you have all that load that Laramie Tunsil's trying to carry around. But the runs to the right were where the problems really were, and you could point at George Fant for those issues, I suppose. I'm not going to act like I focus on the offensive line play over the course of a game. B. Hannon asks, you cool with Mexico City games? No! Fuck playing overseas! Fuck playing in other countries! Fuck playing in Toronto! Fuck playing in Mexico City! I don't think that Mexico City even has a stadium good enough to play there. Didn't they cancel the last one at Estadio Azteca with all the smog? And this is nothing against Mexico City, which seems like it actually isn't a fun place to visit, assuming you stay in the right neighborhoods and stuff. But yeah, I'm tired of all of these games being played abroad. We're playing games in fucking Germany later this year too. My grandfather, who fought in World War II, he would be rolling over in his grave right now. American football, especially if his Birds, the Philadelphia Eagles, are playing over there. Are they? I honestly don't even know. Call me a xenophobe all you want, but like, the NFL doesn't need to expand outside the United States of America. I get it. They're whores. Look at what they're doing with the Taylor Swift shit. They are leaning into that. Oh, we're going to be able to get some tweens that like football. Sure you are. Yeah, they're going to stay when this relationship inevitably ends. Sure thing. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Someone's bringing up the fact that the Rangers are up 9-2. I did kill the Rangers. I did kill them. All these other teams getting beat by zombies. Patty C, we get to see premier football games and Champions League games in America. But do we? Because they don't actually send over the stars. They don't send the international stars over generally for those friendlies, you know? What other comments do we have? YouTube.com/Paul Gallant or Twitch.tv/Gallant says, it's so frustrating that the defense set up the offense to win the game and they scored 3 points. I'm confused on this one. Do you mean that... I'm lost. You're going to have to get back to me on that one. It's frustrating that the defense set up the offense to win the game. I mean, they got the touchdown the last drive of the game. The defense let the offense down. The offense finally did make things happen on the last drive of the game. I would say if I'm pointing the finger at the side of the ball that deserves more blame today, I think it's the defense. It's Desmond Ridder, and he had a career game against you. You forced a couple of fumbles. If not for those fumbles, what are we talking about in the second half for the Falcons? Are we talking about a scoring drive on every single drive? Like, they really seem to have the Texans' number. And Arthur Smith's a pretty good offensive mind. Obviously, he resurrected Ryan Tannehill's career when he was in Tennessee as their offensive coordinator. So they made it work. Really, the only thing I would criticize Atlanta for today was how much they used Tyler Algier. Kashak comments, old school Texans, putting up 3, giving up 6. Yeah. That's why it does feel a little same old Texans, even though I do think that this thing is still moving in the right direction, and I'm not pissed off or frustrated. But with the Astros playing a playoff game a little bit later today, I mean, we're not going to be talking about the Texans much on Monday. You lost to a Falcons team that's boring in a boring game. Manny Martinez says the secondary needs to get healthy ASAP. Well, I don't think we're going to see Derek Stingley for a while, and I do wonder how long this Shaquille Griffin injury is going to keep him out. Flash Sage comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. I think if we score on one of those turnovers, we win this game. Yeah, for sure. Obviously, that would have been the difference. They could not adapt quickly enough to whatever the Falcons defense put up against them. And I will credit the Falcons. Like, it's very easy to say, oh, it's the Texans' fault for this one. But, I mean, they didn't turn the football over, and they didn't make that many mistakes. I just felt like Atlanta had a better game plan for this one. They attacked something in the Texans' defense that they thought was a weakness, throwing to the tight ends as much as they did. Had a lot of success throwing to tight ends. And even though the Texans did well against the run, Falcons still won. And even though the Texans didn't turn the football over, they did a good job of, I think, making it tough for CJ Stroud. They couldn't run the football, the Texans, either. So there you go. Frustrating loss, 21-19. I'm going to be heading to Minute Maid Park to cover tonight's Astros Twins game. We'll have another live stream whenever I get back. I imagine that's going to be at like 11:30 midnight or so. Until then, you can watch that on youtube.com/PaulGallant or twitch.tv/GallantSays. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like the video, whatever. Whatever you do on YouTube, please do it. You can also, of course, subscribe to this in audio form. There will be an audio version available very soon wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. That might be a nice listen on your way into Minute Maid Park if you're going over there for tonight's Astros and Twins game. Until then, later tonight or tomorrow morning on my radio show, 10 a.m., so long, farewell, have yourselves a wonderful Sunday,